Well, Justin, it's so good to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but it's pretty much all in the realm of AI and what Microsoft is doing in this space specifically and how it relates to nonprofits. So before we dive into the topic today, I'd love to hear from you just a little bit more about Microsoft's Technology for Social Impact, or TSI. Tell us about that group and the work you do for the company.
Well, I'd love to, and I'll start by just anchoring it back to those that we serve, which are nonprofits. There are somewhere between 10 and 12 million nonprofits around the world supporting communities, from Atlanta to Georgia to in Africa and India and everywhere in between. And I think for many years, the tech industry wasn't putting the focus it needed to help nonprofits really advance their missions. And so we built the Tech for Social Impact team as a purpose-built team designed specifically to support the needs of nonprofit from the front end and how they fundraise, how they engage their constituents, to through how they deliver programs and ultimately deliver impact. Today, we support probably about 330, I think is the last count I saw this week, 330,000 organizations on the Microsoft Cloud.
Okay.
We donate and discount several $billion per year to the sector to keep our prices and our offers super affordable because we know nonprofits need that. We have an engineering team that's building specific solutions for their most pressing challenges, from fundraising to how they train and skill up program participants. And we're built as a social business model, which is actually unique in the industry, where we run and take our incremental profits and apply a portion of those back into public good initiatives, which is, I think, a special model and something I'm proud of here at Microsoft.
No, it's fantastic. Well, and I know this topic of AI, there's an interesting wide spectrum of reactions when it comes to AI. Some people are like, absolutely, let's just learn as much as we can. Let's apply it as quickly as possible. Then there's a lot of skeptics out there and people that are very worried about what are the applications of AI? Is it going to take over the world kind of thing, right? And there's a lot of people in between. So let's dive into a bit of that now. When it comes to AI, Microsoft approaches the development of AI through a framework of responsible AI principles. So maybe that's something you could talk about. Explain, what are those responsible AI principles that Microsoft has put together?
Yeah, no, and I just comment on the hype cycle that we've been, right? AI was going to save the world, then it was going to destroy the world, and now we're all just trying to figure out how do we make it useful in the world, and how do we make it ensure that it respects the fundamental rights and principles that we all hold dear. And within our responsible AI framework, to answer your question, we have 6 core principles that we use, not just as architecture, but fundamentally as policies that guide our engineering, design, customer implementation work that we do. So it's at the very fabric of how we build and manage the products and solutions that we do. And those 6 principles are: number 1, fairness; number 2, ensuring reliability and safety; ensuring privacy and security. A critical one for me in working with the global majority or the global South is inclusiveness and ensuring AI is useful for all. Transparency, so that we understand how AI is operating, and ultimately accountability for the companies that are producing, like Microsoft, these models, ultimately to ensure that our customers understand how they're going to behave and how they can be most useful. Now, it's a constantly evolving model, and the one thing that I spend a lot of time on is that inclusiveness pillar. And
Right.
I think many of your listeners will be saying, "Oh, listen, how are we going to be bringing this technology into Ethiopia, into
Right.
parts of Southeast Asia, where these models, a lot of the large language models, were trained on those languages?" And I'm really proud of the work we're doing in our Microsoft research team to really open up our AI capabilities and open up their language capabilities so that ultimately these tools work everywhere in the world.
No, well said. And we'll get into that a little bit more in terms of how this, scales and how this also goes across the world with the right lens. Now, one of the biggest concerns around AI courses centers around privacy, especially as it pertains to the nonprofits that serve vulnerable populations. And you've already kind of mentioned some of that. Now, many people worry that when AI becomes integrated into one's organization, privacy is really out the door. It will no longer be possible. So how are you finding a balance between the use of AI on the one hand, but privacy in the nonprofit sector on the other?
No, it's a really good point. And, I think the our business model, starting with when we built the cloud technology to move your infrastructure into the cloud, and now extending into AI, puts really privacy at the center. And how do we do that specifically? Number one, ensuring that organizations have end-to-end control over the collection, use, and distribution of their data, including how these models are using their data, and have an ability to opt in and manage that. That is built into the design of our AI solutions. And core to our business model is ultimately our customers' data is their data. It is not our data. And there are other business models in the world that are a bit different than that. The second is really keeping our privacy standards high on all of the solutions that we're building. One of the higher privacy standards in the world is GDPR. We were the first company to implement that policy across all of our cloud services. And then we decided not just to implement it for those that were impacted by GDPR, say in Europe, but for all customers everywhere in the world. And then finally, we use a security development lifecycle model that builds in privacy by design and creates some of those features that I highlighted, where organizations get to opt into how their data is being used, and they're able to manage that. Now, I think it's important to note, though, that privacy is only as strong as its weakest link. And the other side of privacy is security, right? And we know that the nonprofit sector is, aside from government, is the second and sometimes the third most targeted sector in the world. Their nonprofits are perceived as an easier target, and they have valuable data, be that just credit card information or beneficiary information that nation states may be after. And so as we think about this notion of privacy, we also have to think about how do we harden security for the nonprofit sector as a whole.
No, that's good. I think you addressed some of those key concerns that people do have. Now, another concern that emerges around AI is the issue of bias. With vulnerable populations in mind, in particular, the ways AI could be a tool in helping humanitarian organizations around the world, how can we do that while mitigating the potential bias that could happen?
There's a lot of work to be done in this area, and it's a personal passion for me as well. Because if we think about the power of AI to, as an example, use a language model to help a beneficiary get access to a resource, get information for their crops, it needs to operate in the local language and the local cultural context that person is in. If it's operating in English, built on a US or a British context, it's not very helpful. And so there's a lot of work that we have completed in terms of a comprehensive multilingual evaluation of GPT models to benchmark performance, privacy, safety, transparency across language and cultures. And we're working every day to expand that capability so that it's increasingly representative. Now, even with that, we have, I think, a challenge with lower resource language, let's say Swahili, or let's even say Thai, as two different kinds of languages. We have a project which your listeners can look up called Elora, that's run by our Microsoft Research Center, that uses actually language technology that we've built to ingest and update large language models so they become more and more performant the more they're used in that language context. And so this is an effort that's not going to be solved overnight, but it's something we're absolutely committed to. Our mission is to support every person and organization on the planet, and that means the planet. And we're headed in that direction and working hard every day to make it more inclusive.
Well, I love that commitment to pursuing that goal. Now, you definitely are using AI for good in many ways. So let's talk about that when it's specifically with the nonprofit sector. As we were talking a bit on the outset of this podcast, many of my listeners are fascinated by the concept of AI and the topic of AI. But at the end of the day, they want to know, can it be used for good? Can it really benefit my organization? Can it benefit my leadership?